You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players, and all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Rathe. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 145 of Arsenal Pass. Hayden Dow with Brendan Patrick, as always. And as this pod drops, I'm about to sleeve up my deck for the world premiere of Heavy Hitters in what many, Brendan, are calling Welcome to Rathe 2.0. And to be honest, this preview season of what we've seen so far, it kind of does look like it, and I'm super into it.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear about why you think that. I mean, I've looked at the cards individually. I think I've evaluated them mostly in a vacuum. So I haven't really put the set together contextually. So it's not really evoking Welcome to Rathe vibes for me quite yet. I know, of course, weapons and then the classes we're used to. That aspect is there. But in terms of gameplay, I don't see it yet. I think the main thing that's taking me away from Welcome to Rathe is the new mechanics, is the tokens, because that was not something we had a lot of in Welcome to Rathe. But yeah, I'm keen to hear about why you think will evoke some of those old gameplay patterns.
Yeah, I mean, also partly it's just the clickbait, right? You know, but no, I actually think so. We're the time of recording, just to timestamp it. We Wednesday morning my time. It's Tuesday afternoon, early evening US time. So we're kind of like halfway through not quite halfway through the previous season. We're into the second day. And we started day one with, if you haven't been keeping track, if you haven't been keeping up by now, the pod drops basically most of the set you're about to see, because people at the world premiere are going to be posting everything. So you're gonna see the Fable very soon, I think, even. But I think what is very cool about the set, I think, from what I've seen so far, is just that we started with the weapons on day one. They went weapons equipment, or weapons were prior, mostly equipment on day one of the previous season. And then day two so far, we've been seeing some really cool more hybrid cards. We've seen more class cards. We've seen some of the Majestics as well. There's been a lot of generic cards we've seen today as well. So we're going to go through a lot of these, talk about the format from, the set from what we're seeing, from just some first thoughts on Limited, which will lead into our Limited review next week, but also any sort of thoughts on Constructed as we start to see some of these cards. There are some powerful cards that have been shown. But I'm actually most excited to talk about the equipment, because there's so much equipment in the set, and we're getting rare weapons and equipment for the first time in a set like this. We've obviously seen them before in supplemental sets, but not in limited playable sets like this, and not to this kind of fashion. And yeah, and then I can talk a little bit more about why I think it's Welcome to Rathe 2.0 to an extent. It's not purely, but there's a few things I think are going to mean that, I don't know, this to me maybe is like a little bit of hopefully a turning point in Limited, just with this how the set, and it feels like revisiting some really core kind of winners from the early days of Flesh and Blood.
I thought I saw a tweet from someone that was at the Celebrational that said that there was no Fabled in this set. How confident are you there is a Fable?
They just didn't. So some players got early access to the sets for the Celebrational event, and they have like a master set, but there was no Fable, which I was like, oh, what if they wanted to play the Fable in their decks? But I guess, yeah, I think they just didn't get the Fable. I think there is a Fable. Yeah.
Okay. I thought I saw a tweet that was like, oh, there's no Fable in the set, and personally, I think that's great, or something.
Surely there's a Fable. But first set with no Fable.
Well, wow. I thought the post was about, like, that's awesome, because there's, I don't know. I could be wrong. I really don't go on Twitter much these days, to be honest.
Well, we'll have to talk about that in a second then. Let's start with Weeks in Flesh and Blood. Brendan, what's been happening for you? We're about to hit Heavy Hitters, so I imagine from next week you're going to start playing some Flesh and Blood. Yeah,
so Tark reached out to me yesterday for LA, and then I messaged Sasha as well.
Mr. Tark Patel.
Yes. I messaged Sasha, and I was like, can you just please come to LA? And he was like, okay.
I've been trying.
No, he said okay. I think he's going to come.
Oh, really? What?
Yeah.
Why did you say yes to you, but not to me?
Because it's a cry for help. That's where I was at. I was like, can you just please come to this fucking tournament? Yeah, I just really enjoy testing with Sasha, and I don't know, I've just done it for like every single tournament. So that's why I was like, can you just please come to this, goddammit? So I have a call with him, I think, after this, and yeah, hopefully I can get him out the week before, and we can get some testing in. I'm ready to dive into it, to be honest. I would much prefer to start testing for LA with Sasha than just like get on Talishar and start grinding, because that sounds painful. That sounds
Hey, well, I'm keen to start playing some games. So
Yeah, our time zones are pretty rough.
no. We got a question asked on the from the pod in the comments last week about Brendan. Someone said they were very I'd say enthusiastic about their reply. They said, Brendan, now that you're back to playing, they need you to produce some gameplay. They want to see you playing some games.
I will let this person know that my gameplay history, accolades against Hayden have nothing to do with play skill.
He's retiring on top.
Yeah, me playing the game more or less has nothing to do with me beating Hayden on camera. It just happens for some reason. I don't know.
Happens a lot. Happens a lot.
Yeah, especially in Dynasty. That was bad.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to... I'm going to play Flesh and Blood on Friday, so the day this pod drops. This will be my first time playing Flesh and Blood in... basically since Worlds. I haven't really played much Fab. I've been obviously keeping up, very invested in the previous season, and you've been making, of course, content and staying abreast of it. But I haven't really played any Flesh and Blood since Worlds, so I'm super excited to get into it this weekend. Start with the premiere, playing some Sealed. Going to try and play a couple of Sealed events on the Friday, and of course the Calling. Heavy Hitters Calling on Saturday. I feel like my ego can't face missing another day two, Brendan. So I'm going to try my best to make sure I day two. I'm not particularly good at limited callings, just historically, as much as I love limited. I need to get to that draft portion. That's where I really need to get to. Sealed it's not my friend.
I don't know if anybody actually is like, yeah, Sealed is my strong suit in Flesh and Blood. So it's a bit of a crapshoot. Sometimes depends on the set. Maybe this set is a little bit better for it. I felt like Welcome to Rathe is a fine Sealed format. If this is Welcome to Rathe-esque set, but who knows? Mm-hmm. We will see. Anyway, Hayden, talk to me about this other headline you have here for your week in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, I've been playing some Magic the Gathering. So we immediately have 10% of our listeners just turning off. But Flesh and Blood down season. I haven't played Magic in years. I went to a Magic event for the first time in I think it must be 4 years. I went to a draft, so they released this. They've been doing these like remastered sets for Magic the Gathering, and they've remastered, or they've like taken the collation of like some of my favorite sets into like a one master set of which is Ravnica, which I just absolutely loved when I played the original Guilds of Ravnica. And so I was like, wow, I want to, and it's not on Arena, which is actually the thing that made me. So Arena is the digital client for Magic the Gathering, if you're not aware. I absolutely despise playing digital card games, really. Like, it's just not my thing. So usually one of the other things that's kind of turned me off going and playing limited for Magic, as much as I still really enjoy playing drafts and things like that, is the fact that you show up and these people have been grinding out for 2 weeks before the set releases on their online clients, and they're so far ahead, and I'm just like, oh, this is just kind of boring and not that fun because people have already solved it or they're so far ahead. But this
like
set
Flesh
is
and Blood
paper
for
only.
the Calling.
Wow. Come on, dude. But this is paper only, this set. So on Friday evening, I went out to a local draft and played Magic for the first time. And look, I thoroughly enjoyed the draft. I really didn't enjoy the game.
That's so funny. That is exactly the experience we had in Barcelona when drafting the new Ixalan set. Is the draft is I'm just gonna awesome. It's almost objectively more interesting than Flesh and Blood draft. And,
it is. It is.
But the gameplay sucks ass.
Gameplay's way worse.
Yeah, it's so tedious. It's I'm sure it's fun in certain contexts, but it was not fun for Ixalan, at least for me. Magic. So the Ravnica remastered set, is that all of the guild houses, or like how does that work? Yeah,
so it's the 3 Rav sets. So the Guilds of Ravnica block, the Return to Ravnica, and the is it the Ravnica Guilds of Ravnica? Yeah, City of Guilds, Guilds of Ravnica, and the Return to Ravnica. Those 3 blocks, it's like 300 odd cards. They've taken the best from those sets, a couple of cards from other sets, and basically, but almost all the mechanics from Rav blocks are in there as well. So there's a lot of mechanics in Magic if you don't play Magic. But anyway, I felt it's enough about Magic. But I had a good time. I had one interesting game of my 7 games, but for the most part, it was fine.
Fine. Well, I mean, if you ever get the Magic itch, you should just go play Lorcana. It's like Magic, but it doesn't suck.
Yeah, I might, if I can ever find cards anywhere.
Yeah, you should be able to now. It's
still been tough here.
Yeah, that's how it works down there.
Let's get into the news. Heavy Hitters preview season is in full swing, as we said. We're at the time of recording about almost halfway through the season, and by the time this pod drops, the previous season would have wrapped up. Super excited to kind of hear what people think about the season. Like, how did you find the pacing? How did you find what you were seeing? it felt like we got the mechanics really early. We got the mechanics really, really early this time. So did that still keep people really invested in the season? I don't know. I've been really busy with kind of usually with the previous season, I'm like every hour I check the Discord or whatever to see the new cards, but just with work and stuff, I haven't been able to. So I'm kind of doing like a download every day at the end of the day. But I'd be keen to hear how people have found this previous season and how LSS have handled it.
Well, I wish they would stretch it out. I think Flesh and Blood has one of the worst preview seasons out of any card game that exists.
Really?
Yeah, where it's compressed into the 2 days. It's like I think it works for a very niche group of people that want to digest all that information kind of at once. But I don't know. I feel like drawing it out over a couple months is way more interesting. And as a player, you sort of build a story and a narrative like over these 30, 60 days, and you continually get more pieces and then you just fit the puzzle together. I like that so much more than this like 2-day blitz, because when they have the 2-day blitz, unless I'm hyper invested in the format, which I am every single time because we have to do limited set reviews, it's just like I would just rather not read it. I'm just like, I'll just look at it at a pre-release or something, or watch a video or something like that. It's a lot of information to digest, and I don't think I fully appreciate every single card that comes out.
What about with the the last couple of seasons, particularly this one, where heroes and some spec cards and a few different cards. Like we got about 40 cards shown between heroes, cards, tokens before we even got to the season. Like, is that I kind of like that.
Step in the right direction.
Yeah. I think it's currently 3 days. It's not 2 days, it's 3 days. But I think 4 days feels about right. I feel like the Friday, the Saturday, Sunday, and then maybe another day that's not connected to that kind of weekend, I think would be great. But
yeah, for me, it's like kind of 30 days. I would like to see like 30 days. It slowly trickle out.
I get disengaged at that point. I think I think it can go both ways. But I see your point. World premiere this weekend, pre-release next weekend, which is the 26th to the 28th. And then the following weekend is the release of Heavy Hitters. So enjoy, get out. We will have our limited review hitting next week. We will try and drop that as early as possible, Brendan. I think we're going to try and record that your Monday, my Tuesday, if possible, and then try and get that out basically, as soon as our editors can.
Yeah, and you will have played the set as well, which is that makes a big difference.
Yes, I mean I would play the set quite a bit. So by the time we get to the limited,
I feel like
review.
this one's going to be your best limited review.
Well, if it's not, that's awkward. But it'll be interesting to see the contrast between our thoughts. I think our discussion will look quite different on this limited set review. It's going to be a little bit different to our usual ones. So I'm looking forward to it. All right, do you want to talk about this? We're in the news. Do you want to talk about the Celebrational and the event this weekend? By the way, make sure to check out the coverage this weekend if you're around for the Heavy Hitters World Premiere and the Calling. There is coverage for that done by Savage Feats. You can check that out. I think that is on the Flesh and Blood YouTube page. There is also the Celebrational event happening, Brendan. And I guess let's touch on it. This kind of discourse around Alice is making the decision to give the Celebrational players the access to the Heavy Hitters master set a few days before. The Calling has caused some people to say, is this the right decision to have players able to access effectively a full set early from an advantage standpoint, from a competitive integrity standpoint? There's kind of been some questions that have been raised. And I know there's been, just to clarify, this has been a big discussion on X, Twitter, whatever. And mostly, honestly, it's been, I would say, competitive players saying, unsure about the competitive integrity here, and could LSS have done a better job with how they handle this in terms of the scheduling? Nothing, by the way, has been said. There were some people saying, "Oh, this is a bit mean to the players and unfair to the players." I don't think anyone said anything about the players. Like this isn't on them in whatsoever shape or form. I think this is about LSS and their decision. This has nothing to do with the players in the Celebrational event. But there has been a discourse that is happening this week around early access to cards. It's the first time I've kind of seen it. And some people have obviously been caught off guard about maybe competitive integrity of allowing players that'll be playing an event potentially some advantage.
Well, maybe they could start recording drafts since they're being more flexible on competitive integrity.
No, we can't, because of competitive integrity reasons, we can't record the draft.
Yeah, so that was a little meme that I wrote in our group chat because it's a bit ironic. For me, I think I have like one of the worst responses to this thing. I think it's an objective competitive advantage. Like if you argue against that, I think it's pretty silly. But ultimately, I just don't care. I just don't care at all. And that's not just because if I was going to the tournament, I still wouldn't really care. I don't know if that's because I'm jaded and, this is like one of many decisions I maybe haven't agreed with, or I was like, oh, that's kind of funky. But I think to really blow it out of proportion and hyper focus on it, it's just like, dude, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's a competitive advantage, yes, but players get infinite competitive advantages at any tournament. You could be like, oh, this player has more disposable time, competitive advantage. This player has better access to resources to travel, competitive advantage. This player has technology, competitive advantage. It's just like, it does come from the publisher, this one directly, but ultimately these tournaments are not 100% fair to begin with. I know that probably the unfairness should not be being handed down from the publisher itself. It maybe could have been handled differently, but I just don't care. It's a minor one at that. It's going to a very, very small set of players. People will probably be pissed if one of those players wins or even top eights, but if not, it's like everyone's just going to forget about it. And it's just the next thing that Fab Twitter is going to, rage about. And that's what, I don't know. Ultimately, my answer was just like, I genuinely couldn't care less.
Fair. I thought it was worth us sort of addressing because my gut reaction when I kind of saw was like, I was definitely annoyed. I was like just why this decision? There's so many ways you could do, make sure that the celebration players have access to these cards early without this need for this discourse or reaction, because you could just make it so that you just shifted the season, like the previous season, to 3 days earlier, for instance. And I had heard that LSS felt they couldn't do that for whatever reason, is what it is. But that was kind of my initial reaction. And then, to be honest, my reaction after that was just like, the discourse on Twitter is just so toxic. And honestly, like, it's mostly from, unfortunately, the side of so a couple of players who sort of like post and go like, feel like this maybe isn't the right decision. This feels a little bit unfair, competitive integrity. And then just the comments being like, you're attacking the players and you're doing this and you're doing that. I'm just like, oh,
I feel bad.
I just can't deal with that shit.
The players that got invited,
It's not.
Yeah, they're not. I feel like they're not even getting shit. But it's just like, I would be so annoyed if I was in their position. I was just like, I would just feel like.
Who would you be annoyed at?
I would just be annoyed at the situation. I would just think it would be. It was just incredibly stupid that I was put in the situation and that everybody's complaining. I probably would not play the calling. I'd probably be like, okay, I'm just gonna go hang out in wherever location.
It's nah.
Because it's just like, I don't know. These kind of things can be avoided. Like I said, I genuinely think it's not a big deal, and that people are probably a bit more angry than they should be. But at the end of the day, it's just like, this is an obvious conflict of interest, and I don't know why they created a situation where this occurred in the first place. It was very short.
I would hate to be in this situation. I would hate to be in this situation.
At the very least, this was incredibly short-sighted. It was just like, even if LSS was like, we're okay with this, it's a small competitive advantage, they'll get over it. I think that's a fine approach, by the way. You put the players that you invited to your celebration in this like really awkward position. And I think that's the big offense, is like, they invited these people out and now these people are like, okay, are we like the villains of Flesh and Blood here? Like, what are we supposed to do? It's a bad situation. I think LSS should have handled it a bit more strategically. But again, I genuinely don't care about the small competitive advantage that these very small amount of players are getting.
I agree. I feel the same. I think it's really unfair to the players to a degree. I think, to be clear, I've not seen anything saying about the players, or, to be honest, like taking issue with the players. It's being directed at LSS, but people's interpretation, the way people read through these things and comment on things get lost in translation. Twitter's not a good place for discourse, really, is it? Anyway, yada yada yada. But I think I was thinking about it, it's like, if I was in that situation, like, I actually would feel it's really tough, because you get given access to the set. You probably, if for me, I have like friends attending the calling, and honestly, like, as a competitive player who wants to take competitive advantages, whether that's extra time, resources dedicated to it, being able to play with the best players in the world, all these sorts of things, access to card information early is like a competitive advantage. And just to be put in that situation, or to potentially even have like my integrity scrutinized, regardless of whether I decided to share that information with my friends or not, like it's just a shit spot to be in.
Let's be real. The real fiasco that could, and this didn't happen, I don't know shit, but the real fiasco here is like one of these players like going to their testing group and just like also giving out, or going to some select group of players and also giving out the entire information. And it's like there's a huge asymmetry on like what some players have and what some players don't. And like, these situations, although they don't exist in reality yet, or maybe ever will, the possibility of them should not have been, like, it shouldn't have been a thing in the first place, and LSS just definitely dropped the ball there. Although, like, one thing I want to say is, like, any negativity around the celebration, in my opinion, is super cringe. Like, whether you're jealous that you weren't invited, whether you're angry that they gave the cards out early, like, to be negative about that, any of that is just kind of cringe because, like, from LSS's point of view, they try to do something special.
Yeah.
And I know everybody doesn't agree with, like, who was invited, who wasn't, or, like, whatever. But for the end result of this entire thing to be, like, all this negative sentiment and, like, jaded people, that's cringe. Like, you should just look at the bright side of it. You know, some people got that. What other word can you use? Like,
No, I just
some people got it is. Some people, like, this is overall a positive experience for the game. They finally got to put in their celebration. Legendary Studios worked very hard to get to a place where they could even do this. It's a cool thing. Just, like, shut the fuck up about the negative stuff and just, like, let it happen. Like, that, I wasn't invited. Do you think that made me feel amazing? No, but you have to, like, let those things go and just, like, appreciate the positive things that are happening because it's good for the game. It's good for the publisher. It's good for the players. It's good for overall. It's positive. And yeah, I just think you just gotta reframe it.
Yep. I think good to bring it up. And I know there's some people who wouldn't be aware. So yeah, we can leave it at that. The Commander Cookout. I want to move on to the Commander Cookout. The past couple of weeks, we've definitely gone to some great questions and comments in the YouTube section of the pod. This week, I've pulled out a question from our Discord, actually, which is a bit more of an in-depth question. So I want to dive into this, Brendan, and have a little bit of a discussion because I think this is something that we continue to revisit with every new set, and it doesn't seem to change. And I think this is a question. So this comes from Krusenstein from our Discord and says, is it possible that we get a deep dive on why yellows suck, in quotation marks? There are a couple of assumptions I'd state and appreciate an explanation of why they're wrong. So this individual's asked us a question. They've made a bunch of statements and they want us to either, disagree or agree with these statements, I guess. And we'll go through them one by one. So I'll read them out, Brendan. We can talk about kind of why yellows suck, unless you want to say anything, first of all, about just why yellows suck. Or maybe we can go through these and then we can wrap it up.
Well, they're not flexible. Like, the modality of a yellow is just like, it's the jack of all trades, like Master of None. It just does everything worse than its blue counterpart or its red counterpart in almost every single scenario in Flesh and Blood, outside of hyper synergistic things like Luminaris, Bolton, etc. Like, your blue cards are your resource. You would never want your yellow card to be a resource card, and you would never want it to be an attacking card. You would always prefer that the attacking card be a red version of the yellow, and you'd always prefer that the resource version of that card would be a blue. So they just exist in this middle ground where they are genuinely terrible if their red and blue counterparts exist. And I think that if yellows are being played in a deck, when there is a cycle of that card, it's a good indication, or it can be a leading indicator that that card is actually overpowered. Because, like, if you're ever playing the yellow version of a card, it's kind of dubious, unless it's a Majestic Super or something like that.
Yeah.
I think about cards like Plunder Run, right?
Yeah, well, you need to get to 9 copies because the card's so powerful.
Yeah, it's like if someone is playing the yellow version of a cycle, or if a deck is playing the yellow version of a cycle, it is not 100%, but it is a leading indicator that that card is just overpowered because you're playing the most suboptimal version of the card.
There's definitely been times where I've played yellows over reds, for instance. So, like, because there are some cards that just, I think, function better because the resource is more relevant. So if you look at a red, a blue, and a yellow of a cycle, the defense value is the same, right? Mm-hmm. Generally, if it's an attack action, the attack value is obviously different. But in non-attack actions, it's usually a scaling return, right? And one I'll use is like Movrian Skies. Yep. So the go again effect is symmetric across all of those, right? But then you have the scaling, create 1 rune chant, 2 rune chant, 3 rune chant as you go blue to red. And that percentage of what the changes is really small on the cards. So I think blue and then yellow tend to be the stronger colors of that, as opposed to red, because of you get the flexibility of that extra resource. Red versus yellow is actually more important when the percentage of the change of the effect is so much smaller comparative to other cards.
That's interesting because my experience was always playing 9 Mauve, which is why the yellows made it in there. But I actually think that rather than using it for its offensive value or making the comparison to the offensive value when talking about red versus yellow and yellow being comparable for one reason or another, is like when ice exists in the game, like you can make an argument, and I think it would be a false argument that like, oh, my deck can actually utilize yellow resource cards because so many things cost 2, my weapon costs 2, like yellows actually work in my deck. But back when ice existed in the game, it further made that not correct, right? Because all of these things that cost 2 that would make yellows playable as resource cards, you now have the threat of the additional resource, and blues are just objectively better in almost every scenario. I think like Rhinar is a hero that uses a lot of yellows, but that's because of the 6 attack. Like if there were blue variants that were 6s, even if they costed way more to actually play, you would play those cards. Like they're just better.
Yeah. Let's go through these, the part of the question that was given to us. So consistency. You talk a lot about consistency in decks and why it is good in Fab. Wouldn't a deck full of yellows be the most consistent resource base you can create given the right cost resource ratio setup? Do you think that yellows would be stronger regarding the resource base if shuffling in Fab had true randomness? We know that even without any bad intention by players, shuffling in card games does not create true randomness, and there are techniques like pitch stacking that support a favorable distribution of cards for the player. Just that last part, yes, humans are notoriously terrible at randomization, but for the most part, it's enough that randomization occurs, I think. So I think we can leave that part alone. But in terms of the consistency, I mean,
it is more consistent. It's more consistently shit. It definitely is more consistent. It's just consistently bad.
Yes, I mean the problem is so let's take an example. Let's say you have an attack action. It costs 2 and it defends for 3, and at blue it attacks for 4. Yellow it attacks for 5, red attacks for 6. It's called Brutal Assault. Dante Delphico Special, as some of us like to call it. That is the card in question. So if you had all your deck full of yellow Brutal Assaults, yes, you could consistently always block with 2 cards and attack with your yellow for 5, right? But that's 11 value out of your hand. 2 cards that defend for 3 equals 6, and then pitch your other yellow for your attack for 5. That's 11. That's worse than just defending with 4 blues. And then your blues or it's worse than defend with 3 cards and swing with your Anathos for 4, which is 13 value. So the problem with yes, it's consistent, but it's not consistently good. It's just, you could say the same thing about having replace those with yellows and now they're blues, but put a weapon in the mix, or just defend with all the cards and your return's going to be better anyway. So that's the problem with, I guess, this view of the consistency of yellows and the mode they play off between power and resource is that they might be jack of all, but they're certainly master of none, and that's really important in Flesh and Blood.
So if anybody, I just want to quickly tangent, if anybody doesn't know the Arsenal Pass lore on Brutal Assault, it's a meme on Dante Delphico, who was somewhat of a infamous player. Back in the early days of Skirmish, played a lot of Ira, won a lot. When Drone of Brutality got banned, his substitute card for Drone of Brutality, by the way, was Brutal Assault, which is Drone of Brutality with no text. Yeah, it was just bad. It was not a good option. I'll say that. Played that in a competitive tournament.
Do you know what other people replaced it with? Push the point.
Yeah, this honestly, any card is better than Brutal Assault.
Hurricane technique. Anyway, so I think that answers that question. Average card value. This is the next part of this question. If games would go through multiple cycles and we assume that you had to use blues for attacks, etc., wouldn't the average card value between a full yellow and a red/blue gravitate towards the same number? Well, no, because all the cards defend for 3, right? And you're never attacking with your whole hand. And if you're attacking with your whole hand, it's better to have your perfect resource and then your perfect attack balance split. So if you can have, so the question here is, right, it's okay, if everything's yellow and we use the same example we just used, well, that would mean that, the average card value, you're always averaging out to 11 in those hands. But we just talked about, because of the defensive value, if you just block with everything, you're averaging out to 12, or you attacked with your weapon plus defended with 3 cards, you're averaging out to 13 if it's an Anathos or a Romping Club or whatever. Yeah, so
very consistently 11. You can't,
which is consistently below rate.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of, I think, honestly, these are some great statements, because I think we can really paint a picture of why yellows are so terrible, honestly, and the real problem with yellows shines in limited, I think, because of this average value. But yeah, average card value is not higher because of yellows. It's not even the same because of yellows. It's just worse than if you have a deck full of blues and reds.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, yellows, if we didn't have Majestics and Supers that were yellows, I would honestly question why they exist in Flesh and Blood at all. And I think it is for limited, to be honest. I think they add potentially more depth to the limited format, because they add more variety as you go from draft to draft. But in constructed, yeah, I mean, not limited. Yellow design in Flesh and Blood is definitely odd.
We have seen the amount of yellows drop over sets. We look back to Welcome to Rathe, Arcane Raising, Monarch, Tales of Aria, like there was more yellows, and then we go to Uprising, you have red only cards. The red matter stuff starts to come in. I think they've tried, they've done cycles that don't have the yellow or the blue, or they don't have, they're only single color cycles. I think those are really interesting ways to reduce the amount of yellows. But ultimately, you just kind of speculated around why we have yellows for limited. I think we could just not. We could just have a lot less, and I think that would.
Yeah,
because
I think they want that. It adds variance, right? Like
it does. That's
the yellow. Yeah, the vector is like just variance, and not necessarily good variance, but it does add variance.
There's some skill interpretation.
Yeah,
there's still some skill interpretation about which are the best yellows. How do you utilize your yellows? Like there is some of that. But yeah, so if let's example, you've got your 4 brutal assaults, or you've got your 2 blue brutal assaults and your 2 red brutal assaults, or half your deck's red, half your deck's blue, then you have the option to defend with all those cards, or you could defend with 2 of them, and then 1 red, 1 blue, pitch your other blue brutal assault, attack with your red brutal assault. We're above that 11 that we just talked about. We're now at 12. So just a combination, and yes, there's consistency issues that can come in with that. But again, these all defend for 3. So like the power vector. So if we take, let's take the brutal assault example, right? And we compare blue, yellow, and red. At red, we have effectively, all these cards defend for 3. So the defense is the same. We can leave that out. But then you're getting +1 attack for -1 resource. On the blue side of it versus the yellow, you're getting -1 attack, but +1 resource. But the problem is you always want to maximize your resources. That 1 resource is so valuable, and that 1 attack is just better. So you want to have the combination of blues and reds, not the yellows. Like the consistency, the power trade-off, it just doesn't make sense, unfortunately. Let's go to this last couple. Blue card design. When we compare red-blue attack reactions with red-blue attack non-attack actions, do you consider it a design flaw that blue attack / non-attack action cards have less attack value instead of less block value? I think that's a great question. Could LSS in Design Future play around with the defensive value of cycles of cards? Because that is kind of one of the problems that we've just explained with yellow, is that all these cards defend for 3, or they all defend for 2, whatever. They have the same defensive value. So at that point, you're now just looking at the pitch value and the attack value.
Yeah. Could they experiment with it? They could. I don't think they should. I'm not sure how confusing it would be to players, but it's a significant non-zero amount, and probably adds enough of a burden to the new or intermediate player experience that it's not worth it, unless we find that the current way block values are balanced on cycles of cards is just so detrimental to design that we can never escape this the confines of it.
Mm-hmm. And then this last part of the question is breakpoints. Red defense reactions seem to be very good because they can cover breakpoints. Of course, a lot of defensive reactions at red, sink below Favicine, defend for 4, and we know how good breakpoints are in Flesh and Blood because of on-hit effects, but also, unmovable for 7, etc. Are yellows better or more acceptable, at least, in a class like Warrior that has access to a lot of armor, given the games are short to medium length? And the problem with that is that you lose potential value on your armor. So if you're now having to use your armor to cover up breakpoints because you're playing yellow cards, you're disadvantaging yourself with the use of your armor. Why not just play a red card in there? Because you're going to defend with it anyway if it's a defense reaction. So yellow defense reactions, I think, are among, honestly, the weakest of yellow cards, unfortunately, except for maybe Springboard Somersault, because that card's cool and it can defend for 4.
Yep, that card is also above rate. I mean, that card is effectively...
Exactly. It can be above rate.
Yeah. I mean... it's kind of above rate in the way Wounded Bull is. We're only supposed to play it in one way, which is from your arsenal. But I mean, that card just functions as a red. It just happens to be yellow. It's kind of an outlier. But yeah, you're right. In terms of covering breakpoints, you would... I can't imagine a scenario where you wouldn't rather just block with the defense reaction than block with the defense reaction plus armor, even if you had the trade-off of the additional resource as sort of like a modality on the card if you wanted to pitch it. You'd rather be pitching a blue, and if you're defending, in this case, it's a defense reaction, you'd rather just be defending with the card.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's our thank you to Krusenstein for being a associate producer on our thesis of why yellows are pretty shit in Flesh and Blood, and being able to explain that in a nice kind of broken down way. I hope that I'd love to hear feedback on that kind of question. I thought it was a great question. So, and that's why I wanted us to address it.
I have a question.
Because I think it was well laid out. Okay, go.
I mean, do yellows even have a place in Flesh and Blood? Could they actually get rid of yellows in the game design? Let's say that we had a fully rotating format, right? So you don't have this burden of previous yellows. Fully rotates. Does Flesh and Blood actually need yellows in a cycle? Do they even make sense?
Yes, I to a degree, yes. I think they do make sense. for I think yellow is really interesting. I think there's areas of design where they can leverage yellow. So obviously the classic example is Luminaris and Prism. Like that's, that they're using yellows for a particular reason. But and we're going to see it with Kasai now, right, as well. But I think there is some interesting ways they can interact with yellows. And I think that's what makes yellows interesting. I think having some number of yellows in a limited set, like you kind of talked about before, from like a variant standpoint, but I also think from a kind of skill standpoint, how do you deck build with these yellows? How do you draft with the knowledge that you're going to have some yellows in your deck if you want to compete in a hero or a particular archetype, class, etc.? I think that's interesting. I just think that, there is a scope to potentially have less yellows in a set and kind of make use them as a design feature rather than a guaranteed, you have yellows in the cycle and live with it kind of thing. I think it could be more of a design factor, I think.
I like it. I like it as a way to tone down the power of majestic cards that aren't only powerful because of some number value. Like in my opinion, a card like Aether Wildfire, I think it doesn't make sense based on the equation or the quantitative design of the card. That's why it's red and it deals the damage it deals. But Aether Wildfire is absolutely a card that could have been yellow. I think that would.
But imagine if Sonic Boom was red. Full breakpoint.
Exactly, that would be OP. Yeah. But you're assuming that it gets the additional damage. Like, I think that they could have, it goes outside of their design framework because everything is so structured based off this equation. But like these super powerful cards that exist at Majestic or Super, I think that they can make them yellows, and they can have above rate values, but they just don't have this additional modality. Being pitched. So like Aether Wildfire could have been like a yellow. That'd probably just make that would just make the card better right now.
We'd have to deal 3 damage.
Yeah, we'll have to deal 3 damage. But that might have been,
because there's
a
framework, like you say, right?
For some of these cards. Yeah, the framework is, I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but the framework is, I had another question come up while I was thinking about that. Is like, should Flesh and Blood continue to design cards in a way that are so strict to the framework, or should they stretch design more to sort of go outside the box of that? Whether it is, maybe making some cards, above or below that framework's value, or adding on these like extra clauses to cards that aren't necessarily quantitative in nature. Like
they have.
Yeah, you think so?
They have. They've done that. Yeah, 100% they've done that. You can see cards that, you can look at the Codex cycle, right? Yep. You can look at even Springboard Somersault we just talked about. That's from the very first set of Flesh and Blood, and that kind of does, to a degree, break out of the framework, but it has an if and or clause trigger to it, right? Mm-hmm. So
I was thinking about Springboard Somersault. It is effectively, because we were talking about it as a yellow, but it's effectively a Majestic, right? Because it doesn't have a red or blue counterpart. We still need red energy potion. That's what we need.
No, we don't. But there's a reason. So that's a good example, right? There's a reason why we'll never see some cycles of some cards, because they just wouldn't make sense. They might fit into the framework, but from a power level of what they could do with interaction with other things, or because of the design of the game, you just wouldn't print them, right? So let's use Swing Big, for example. If you printed that as a cycle and you had blue Swing Big, because we know how that interacts with Brute and the discard effect and the consistency of blues, like you just can't have that. So there's a few reasons why we couldn't have cycles of particular things. But even if they they could potentially fit in the framework, it just wouldn't make sense. So let's move on. We've got some previews to talk about in the full swing of preview season. I want to go through some things that just cards we haven't touched on in the last few weeks, and I'll kind of want to go a little bit sequentially through some of the releases we've seen, Brendan. And I think the first thing I want to talk about is we've seen a lot of the weapons now. I think there's a couple. I think there might be the Brute token we haven't seen yet. But for the most part, we've seen a lot of the weapons at the rare cycle now. So, for instance, we saw some great names in the set.
Yeah, what's with all the innuendo? It's like, it's really on the nose.
Let's start with Ball Breaker, yeah? So Ball Breaker is a rare Brute weapon. It's a flail. It's one-handed. It's a once per turn action, 2 resources attack. And it says if you've discarded a card with 6 or more attack this turn, it gets +1, and it has 3 base attack. So if you attack with it and you've discarded a card with 6 or more, it's going to have 4. It's kind of like a mini romping club, right?
Yeah.
But it's one-handed. So you can play it with Claw, for instance, and less constructed, which I'm kind of a little bit excited about the potential of that.
You can also play with KO. Quickly, before we dive into the card a little bit more, talk to me about the etymology of Ball Breaker. Like, it's a flail, there's a ball in the end, but what balls are we breaking? Like, I don't understand unless this is a reference to testicles. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, because I'm looking at the art and you're not breaking any balls. It's a flail with a ball in the end, but Ball Breaker seems like it was meant to be kind of a meme. I don't know.
Well, Yeah, I mean, I guess ball breaker, like the term means like, like taskmaster or like someone who runs the, demanding, whatever it is. So maybe it's just the reference is that way. I don't know. But that does also reference testicles.
The design team had a bit of fun with this set. Like, mini meat axe. Like, what the fuck?
Wait till we get down further.
Yeah.
What do you think? Let's talk about the cards. What do you think of? I think this card. First of all, limited implication of these rare weapons. We talked about this last week. I really like having rare weapons. The kind of theme of the arena and the battlefield. I think this is really cool. All these different weapons. I think this weapon, obviously, one-handed implication for this current format is because of KO, right? But also, this does mean for our dear friend Rhinar Unlimited, you could play Mini Meat Axe and Ball Breaker, for instance, right? And Mini Meat Axe is a brute weapon, axe one-handed, attacks for 3. It's at rare, and it says once per turn action, 2 resources attack, and when this attacks, draw a card and then discard a random card. So if you have an agility token, does agility token trigger on weapons? It does, right?
I'm not sure.
Quickly, Brendan, look up agility token. But my theory, you could attack with the Mini Meat Axe, and then all of a sudden you've turned your Ball Breaker on, and you've done a 2-card 7 with some Intimidate, for instance. I'm scrolling down now aggressively to the agility
attack.
token.
Yes, it does.
So yeah. I was making sure it's the same as Quicken. So there's some cool stuff in the set, I think. Or maybe you had a Vigor token plus the agility token, and you got to 1-card attack for 7 and Intimidate as Rhinar, for instance. So obviously a little bit niche, but I think there's some really cool. The set looks very deep, which is sweet, and it also has constructed implications, which I like as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and both of these weapons are all the weapons rare. Like, are there no what are the token weapons?
There's token weapons, yeah. So Centauri Saber, we've seen. What are some of the other token weapons? We've seen High Riser, which we can talk about now. This is a token weapon, Guardian Weapon Hammer, one-handed, once per turn attack, action, 3 resources attack. If you've drawn a card this turn, this gets +1 attack. So if you've drawn a card, say you've cycled a gold token, for instance, you're going to get attack for 4 off your hammer. Otherwise, it's going to be for 3. So, it's pretty average, right? Like, it's attack for 3 for 1 card is not particularly good. But, you get to attack for 4. But this is the base. And so we're going to get base token weapons for every hero or every class, it looks like. And then you're going to get some draftable rare weapons where you can potentially... I think this is where we're going to see archetypes. Because some of these weapons, I think, can play... we've seen... what's the one that we spoke about last week? The one that if you lose the clash, you get the -1. The Miller's Grindstone, for instance. So, which is has 4 power, attacks for 3. But if you, when it hits, you clash. If you win, you destroy the top card of the deck. And if they win, then you get a -1 counter on it. So I think there's like archetypes now built around weapons for limited, which I think is cool. We haven't seen that before. We've seen the 6 heroes and you build the archetype within the hero, but now you also get the weapons to go potentially along with that, which I think is sweet.
Yeah. So the interesting paradigm here between Ballbreaker and High Riser. So they both are coming in for 4. One costs 2, one costs 3. But the situations in which you satisfy those conditions are wildly different. One is discarding a card, as one is drawing a card. And when you draw the card, you keep the card. But I'm assuming that the cards that allow you to draw cards are, you have to jump through a bit more hoops than discarding something. I was just thinking about the scenario in terms of like swinging your weapon for 4, and it seems like infinitely better to have drawn a card to be able to satisfy that condition than to have discarded a card. But of course,
costs 1 more though as well.
Yeah, it depends how you're satisfying said condition, which is like, what is the prerequisite? And I'm assuming drawing cards will be much harder than, pay as part of cost, discard card.
Let's talk about the last 2 rare weapons, which are warrior rare weapons. So first one is Hot Streak. This attacks for 2. It's a warrior weapon sword one-handed. It says once per turn action, 1 resource attack. When this is defended by 1 or more attack action cards, Hot Streak's attacks get go again this turn. That seems very good.
Yes, that is very good.
Hot Streaks.
That is very good.
Go again.
Yes, that is very good. I mean, this is one of those. This reminds me of, cards like Surging Militia. Obviously, it's a bit different, but it's like one of these limited cards where damned if you do, damned if you don't in terms of blocking it. So often players just wouldn't block things like this. But, if someone has 1 Surging Militia in their deck, it's one thing to not block that. But if they're swinging, a weapon at you every turn, it's a totally different kind of thing to not block the weapon. Yeah. I'm assuming that like often Warrior will have to lead off with this as their main attack, and they will want to do something out there. So if you don't block it, you potentially tempo them out of whatever they're planning to do for the turn.
Yeah, they drop a bunch of attack reactions or something to pump this up to like 8 damage, and you take 8 damage because you didn't block or whatever. and then your hand is a bit awkward. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you can also just block with non-attack actions, which do exist in the set. Parry Blade is a warrior weapon equipment. So this is interesting. Warrior weapon equipment, Brendan, which we haven't seen too much of, and we've seen things like the mech suit before. It's a sword one-hander, defends for 0, attacks for 2, and says once per turn action, 1 resource attack, and this gets +2 defense while defending a weapon attack, but it has blade break. So, maybe you play this as your secondary weapon. You find a time in the game to block out a weapon, and then you're going to lose this, but in the interim, it can 1 resource attack for 2.
It's interesting. So if you had, let's say you opened a pool and you had access to 2 hot streak and 2 parry blades, what would be your setup?
So my question on hot streak, and I need to check the release notes on this. This is when this is defended by 1 or more attack action cards, hot streaks attacks get going in this turn. Does this refer to just this hot streak, or does this refer to all hot streaks?
Ooh, yeah, that's like an
it doesn't
OG.
say this. Yeah, the templating's interesting.
Yeah, we're like, this is like the OG Flick Flack gets +4. It's like, which Flick Flack? Because you could double stack.
I would assume it's just this hot streak, that each hot streak has this is hot streak 1, hot streak 2, like they have kind of layered naming conventions. If that's the case, then I'm more inclined to probably play a hot streak plus a parry blade, I think. But there are situations maybe where like you have these attack, we haven't seen all the cards so far, maybe you have some non-attack actions that give your weapon go again, you come with the hot streak, they block it, and you're like, okay, well, I attack with this other hot streak, and they're like, I don't have multiple non-attack actions to block with, so I either just take the 2 damage, or I have to block with this card, this attack action, you get go again, and you're like, yep, my last resource, I play this attack or whatever. So I think there's going to be, it'll really depend on your build, and this is kind of what I talk about archetypes in Limited. I think it's really interesting. So
the reason I asked is I felt like the theoretical value you would get out of a hot streak versus a parry blade over the course of a game, because starts in play, stays in play, is much, much higher, right? But I guess that depends, right? Because you can still just, actually the optimal setup might be hot streak plus parry blade, because you just end with parry blade anyway, right? That if you do get the chance to swing your weapon, you're just going to swing parry blade at the end. Okay. Yeah, so
unless you have a way to unless you think you're going to go again multiple times,
in,
and then you get ways to utilize those resources. But yeah, I think parry blade all the time, and then you get that extra 2 defensive value at some point if you need to. So, but that might just be a trap. It might just be incorrect to play parry blade, so you don't play badly and block with it at the wrong time, and then not have the weapon for the end game.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Let's talk about some of the equipment. We've seen a lot of equipment, which makes sense. There is a lot of equipment in the set, some really powerful ones. I want to just quickly brush over some of the common stuff that we're going to see. I don't think there's much constructed implication through these, but I think they're really interesting for Limited. The first I want to talk about is the adversity cycle, which there's a head, chest, arms, and legs for this. There's face adversity, confront adversity, embrace adversity, and overcome adversity. I'm looking at the headpiece here. Defense for 2 has blade break and says this may only defend an attack if the attack's controller has drawn a card this turn. And then adversity says if they've destroyed a vigor token. Confront. Embrace says if they've destroyed a might token, and overcome says if they've destroyed an agility. So a cycle of each. But blade break 2 conditional defense, I mean, it seems good, but it's going to be super. So this skill testing, I think. Like, when do you use this? When do you not? I think this is a really interesting mechanic.
You're evaluating these cards on 2 different axes, I believe. So usually when we're evaluating limited, I guess you always do for limited equipment. You're evaluating a piece of limited equipment in terms of drafting it on other options that are available, right? Because often we'll see a cycle of equipment, and like the arm slot is way better than all the other slots because the other options for your arms are just terrible. Probably will be the same with this. And then you also have the axes of evaluating it based off like this condition, how likely is it to be satisfied by my opponent? If your opponent drawing your card is quite rare, then maybe, vigor tokens are just created way more often or something like that. You're like, okay, I'm actually going to be able to block with this much, much more often than I am with the headpiece. I'm more talking about like picking this in draft, and prioritizing it. So those are the 2 axes I'd be looking at for drafting these adversity pieces.
Yeah, they seem like they've got sideboard implication. I mean, you could go through a whole game and never be able to use one of these, depending on what your opponent's playing. So, yeah, I mean, we'll be giving some limited grades to these cards next week, but I think these, they're powerful, obviously, if you can ever get them off, but sometimes you're just going to have to get them off, and then you're not going to get the kind of flexibility of keeping them till late. So, I don't know. Card kind of seems like it could be good, but also could be terrible.
Contextual.
There's a couple of generic equipments at head that we've seen that have some non-defensive values. So Glory Seeker is a generic equipment head, no defensive value, says instant 3 resources, destroy it, and draw a card. So that's going to trigger some stuff that we've just seen with draw a card, including, the weapon. Sheltered Cove is a generic equipment head, no defensive value, instant 3 resources, destroy this. The next time you would be dealt damage this turn, prevent 2 of that damage. That card, I saw someone refer to this as Earth React at Home. Fair enough. It's quite quite fun. I think that might have been Dick Butcher, actually. And then we've got some hybrid equipment that we've seen. There's quite a few of these, but there's just a couple that I saw of interest. These are kind of cycle ones. So we've got the Guardian Warrior equipment chest, defensive 1. It's called Vigor Girth. There you go. It's an action. It says action, destroy this, create a Vigor token, go again, and has Blade Break. And then, for instance, the Brute Guardian one creates a Might token, and that's arms. And then there's a legs one as well. So, yeah, interesting. Yeah. And I thought you might like Vigor of Girth.
Well, I just don't. It's not Vigor of Girth. It's just Vigor Girth. It's just an odd naming convention.
Oh, it is
too. Glory Seeker really puts
hammers.
Yeah, Glory Seeker really puts into perspective how OP Ragamuffin's hat is. To be honest.
Yes.
Ragamuffin's hat also an instant that draws a card, but it costs 0.
Yeah. So you can pay with a red effectively.
Yeah. That's insane.
You put the carving on top.
Yeah. Crazy.
Let's talk about some of the legendaries. Let's get into the legendaries. These are the ones I think we need to talk about. Apex Bonebreaker. This is the one I'm very excited about, Brendan. This is a Brute Equipment Arms at Legendary. Defends for 2. It has Temper. And it says, when this defends together with a card with 6 or more attack, create a Might token. Mm-hmm. So I'm reading this and I'm going, okay, first time I defend with it, I get 2 value of defense and I get a Might token, like the highest upside. So that's worth 3, sorry. And then the next time I defend for 1 and I get another Might token, 5. So I'm going to get potentially 5 value off my equipment. Yeah. That's really powerful.
Very, very good. Also, Brute's previous arm slots were bad as well.
You just play Gambler's Gloves because it was like better than playing an Iron Rock Gauntlet effectively.
Yeah, this is like, this is so different than that.
This is what I've been wanting for so long.
Yeah, I mean, that coupled with the other Brute cards being printed, Rhino winning a Pro Tour is a wish that you might actually get.
It'll be in my hands, Brendan. Don't you worry.
I was gonna say, Chandler Toe's gonna be smashing you on stream. Or
dude, I reckon I'm gonna start Chandler, the Patrick, the guys out there, the Bruters. Mm-hmm. Should we start a elite Brute squad for Pro Tour LA? That's the question.
Who is the Brute that expertly navigated the matchup against you at Worlds in Blitz?
All right, let's move on. The card's really good. I'm excited for it. Shout out to Zach. I mean, I like Zach. Zach's a cool dude. But screw that game. Let's look at... okay, how do you say this? Is it Arum Aegis? Aurum Aegis?
Well, it reminds me of Rectum because you've been doing all this priming through these other namings. But yeah, Aurum Aegis, I guess. This is a Guardian equipment offhand. It's at Legendary. It's it blocks for 2, Victor Specialization. This counts as gold and has Temper. Maybe this looks pretty decent. I mean, this is the one that isn't the one that immediately jumped out to me. Actually, the next one we'll talk about is the one that jumped out to me. But what are your thoughts on Aurum Aegis?
Which means gold in Latin. I just looked this up, just so.
Yeah, what does rectum mean in Latin? Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody who's listening to this podcast. Like, dude, what the hell?
I mean, it's an offhand, right? The offhand slot is powerful because we have these one-handed weapons. So, I think sort of some flexibility in the offhand slot with some of these new printings is really cool. Obviously, it's a Victor Specialization, but I think the fact that specialization, the fact it's an offhand, I think this has to be powerful. I mean, Temper 3, like let's compare this to Sterling Might, for instance. Mm-hmm. Same blocking values, Temper 2, but this one counts as gold, so you can obviously sacrifice this on the last one to draw a card. So, I mean, that seems pretty good. I think this is going to be good. I think having this kind of effective gold that has some modality to it is good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Greens,
for Victor being able to use it. Obviously, you can't just pay the resources and sack it to draw it. Doesn't but you can use this for gold for all things that count towards gold, or to sacrifice a gold for an effect. So I think it's good. Mm-hmm. Grains of Bloodspill. Okay, this one is powerful, surely. So this is a warrior equipment chest at Legendary. It's a Temper 2 as well, so defense for 2 and has Temper. And says whenever a weapon you control hits, you may pay a resource. If you do, create a Vigor token.
Yeah. And a Vigor token just gives you a resource. So I think so too. But why? You're paying 1 resource to get 1 resource.
So because of the threat of activation, so with Warrior, a lot of the time you're sat there with, available resources and your opponent's like, okay, well, they have the attack reaction because that just makes the most sense for their resources, or they would have used it on their Braces of Belief or whatever beforehand, or the other piece of equipment. But now you're like, okay, well, do they have the equipment, or are they just the reaction, or are they just going to hit and then just net back their resource for next turn? And that is just so powerful. Like you're just not leaking value. Like a lot of the time, Warrior leaks value because you can't utilize your resources in the most efficient way. You don't get the return on all of your resources in a way that you might want to. But now you can actually like hold over resources while holding threat of activation of having like a reprise attack reaction or just any kind of Warrior attack reaction. And I think that's really powerful when combined with the other pieces of legendary equipment that Warrior already has access to.
Interesting. Yeah, because theoretically, you're not actually cheating any resources here unless you're getting some sort of payoff for the token itself, which is very possible. Cards that say, if you've done something with a Vigor token, then satisfy this clause. And in terms of other chests that are available, of course, you have Fenrir Spring Tunic, but you also have that other chest, Courage of Bladehold, which does actually cheat resources. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's very contextual in terms of power level. Right now, we need to see more cards that get payoff from Vigor tokens. We need to, see how relevant it is to do that threat of activation, because that's very theoretical, right? You're talking about having these leftover resources and putting your opponent in a place where they're playing suboptimally to not allow the threat of activation here. So, yeah, I'm interested.
But what about so you pair this with Iron Song Versus, which is the Warrior equipment. Once per turn action, one resource your next sword attack this turn gets when this hits a hero, create a courage token. So you can either pair it with this or the Braces of Belief. And I think, there's just some interesting dynamics around threat of activation, holding the resources over, on hit effects, whether they have the attack reaction. I just think this makes Warrior hard to play against, while if you decide to kind of do nothing and try and play your own game, they still get value or damage. I think that's good. I think it just gives them more flexibility as well, which I think is something they need.
Yeah. I'm currently stuck in the flesh and blood ideology or way of looking at things where I'm just looking for actually cheating actual value, cheating resources, and this just doesn't satisfy any of that. Outside of temper, of course, but there are other options that have temper. So I want this to be good, but until I see cards that it works with, I'd rather just have something that makes resources or actually cheats resources when Courage of Bladehold.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, Warrior does and can revolve around really big turns though as well. And I think, being able to...
That's another aspect of context, I believe, right? So I think it's possible that it could be powerful, but in a vacuum, it's very, very hard to evaluate.
Little energy potions. And then, all right, let's talk about the big one. Balance of Justice. This is a generic equipment head. Defense for 2. It's legendary. Has the keyword guard well, which I think is a terrible keyword, by the way. But guard well says when the combat chain closes, if this defender put a -1 counter on it equal to its defense. So effectively, it's going to defend for 2, and then it's going to defend for 0, because you defend for 2, and then you put 2 -1 counters on it, now it defends for 0, but you can defend for 0 infinitely. After that, it does have 0 defensive value. And it also says instant. Destroy this, draw a card. Activate this ability only if opponent has drawn 2 or more cards this turn. I mean, there's a lot of... So effectively, you can get your 2 defensive value out of this, and then you can destroy this to draw a card if your opponent draws 2 or more cards on a turn.
Yeah, which is 5 value, right? In best case scenario, you're looking at 5.
That's really good.
That's good. I mean, but we talked about the brute equipment, being 5. It's really good, but you're talking about okay, if said hoop is satisfied, which is your opponent drawing 2 cards, then you get 5 value out of this, where if that is not satisfied, then you're getting 2 value out of this equipment.
So I think you're going to satisfy this clause, I'll get to this, every time you play this card, and you're going to get more than 3 value out of the cards you draw a lot of the time, because I think what's going to happen is your opponent's going to play an Art of War, or they're going to play a Blood Rush Bellows, or they're going to play a 3 of a kind or whatever, and then they're going to try and pop off with this massive turn, and you're going to have an extra card to defend with, and potentially that card is going to defend a breakpoint, or that card could even be a defense reaction that you draw into. And so I think that card is actually a lot of the time going to have more than 3 value. Well, maybe not a lot of the time, but a reasonable amount of the time. And it's going to be on a turn that's really key for the opponent.
Yeah.
So I think I might even, in a theoretical standpoint, maybe be able to stretch this card in my mind to 6 value. And I think that's starting to become kind of insane.
I think it's a sideboard card, though. That's...
It depends on the meta, right? Depends on the meta. How many decks? Yeah. So if Brute's meta, for instance, and Ninja's meta, then maybe it's just main deck. Who knows?
Yeah. Interesting. I guess if so in the scenario where all decks you were facing were like a high percent were all satisfying this clause, then I guess it could be main deck. But in terms of like a Flesh and Blood metagame, I think it is just sideboard. Because you need to have the clause satisfied or it's...
Well, let's compare this to Crown. You know, a card that we got to spoil. Defense for 2.
Oh, Crown of Problems.
And then you trade in a card, right? So you get no extra. So you just get 2 value out of it, but you get to trade in a card. And we think that's one of the best equipments in the game, right?
Well,
now all of a sudden...
you trade your arsenal a lot of the time.
Yeah, of course. But that's still, you're not netting a card from that. Whereas this, you are netting a card with Brendan. So I'm just going to put it out there and compare those two.
Fair.
This is quite powerful. But I agree. It has to, obviously, you have to be able to fulfill the effect. Otherwise, it's worse than Crown.
Interesting card. Interesting card. Yeah, I don't think it's bad. I don't want people to think that I'm saying that it's bad.
Yeah.
But
also, you can defend for 2, and because of the guard wall key mechanic, this can sit around for 6 or 7 turns until they actually, draw the cards.
True.
So, okay, very cool card. How are we doing for time on the pod? I think let's cover a couple of other cards that have just been shown today. There's a couple in particular that I want to look at. And of course, we do have the set review next week, and then the week after, we will dive into first look at Classic Constructed with the new set. Let's look at Knucklehead. Is this card broken? That's my question. Okay, it's a Brute Equipment Head, defense for 2. It has Temper at rare. It's a KO specialization, and it has action. Destroy this. Roll a 6-sided die. Until end of turn, your base intellect is the number rolled. So, okay, I block with this once for 2. I get 2 value of it. We're talking about a headpiece here, right? The 2 value. And the next turn, I'm like, oof. I've blocked out this turn. I kind of have nothing to do. I roll my dice. I hit a 5 or a 6.
Yeah.
I've effectively drawn a card or drawn 2 cards. This card seems pretty, obviously high risk, but like this card could be really good.
So if you draw 1 card,
you're screwed.
Well, no, not hit a 1. So you draw 5 cards. Your intellect is 5.
Yeah,
that's strong. I wouldn't say it's OP. I think this card is only OP on the 6.
I agree, and it's also terrible if you roll a 1 or 2 or probably a 3.
Can you Gambler's Glove this? But then, but there's an issue because when you Gambler's Glove it, you go down a card, right? So you you take your value down an entire card when you Gambler's Gloves. I was actually thinking about this card because you can Gambler's Glove this. I was like, wait, but that doesn't actually achieve what you wanted to achieve.
Unless you roll the 6. This is the Brian Gottlieb card that is. You remember when Brian came on the pod and he said we want to increase the ceiling while increasing, decreasing the floor effectively, like create the variance gap. This is the card. Like this is the card. You roll the 6 on this, you're laughing. You roll the 1 or the 2 on this, your opponent's laughing. You know what I mean? Like, but I'd love to see someone just rock up to the skirmish just with this stupid KO deck. They kill everyone on turn 2. They roll 6 every time they roll the dice, and they just walk away with their little prize.
Yeah, what other headpieces are... Because we have another Brute headpiece, I believe. The one that you spoiled that last set. The flesh bag.
Yeah, there's the Scouting flesh bag. But there's also there's a couple of new ones as well.
I was just thinking about Temper. Getting 3 value to this guaranteed.
Temper's good.
Yeah.
And limited, this is going to be a defend for 3, and that's really powerful for KO.
Oh, yeah, that card.
But I just thought, is there a way in a world where like potentially this card is just kind of insane and constructed because of the fact you could have a 6-card hand? 7 card with an arsenal.
Some of my favorite art in the game.
That's cool. A couple other cards I want to talk about. We've seen some generics. Here's a generic action attack at blue. Costs 0, defense for 3, attacks for 2. It's Majestic's called Nasty Surprise. And it says when an opponent's effect puts this into your graveyard from anywhere, create an agility, might, and vigor token. All 3. But the best part of this card is the flavor text, which says, I ain't reading no bloody warn, and then it gets cut off. Last words of Busy the Brash. I don't know. Is this card playable? I'm trying to think, like, what's the effects that are causing your opponent to put this in the graveyard from anywhere? Discard effects, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Or mill effects with Victor or whatever. I don't know. This card seems to me like it's going to be... I feel like we've seen this card before, and it's called, Rusted Relic or whatever. Like, it feels like one of those cards that's in the set that you're going to open and be like, oh, man, I'm annoyed I opened this in my booster.
Yeah, blocks for 3. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be good. It's too contextual.
Okay. What about Pound Town, Brendan? This is a brute action attack. I'm looking at the red. It's a common cycle. At red, it defends for 3, attacks for 7, costs 3. It has beat chest, which if you haven't seen the beat chest mechanic, is insane for brute. As an additional cost to play this, you may discard a card with 6 or more attack. And this card says, Pound Town says, when this attacks, if you've beaten chest this turn, create a might token. Okay, this is last time we were talking about cards with beat chest and not having probably the cost structure we might like. We've got a beat chest card that costs 3 here. There's also another one, Assault and Battery, and it's the exact same text, except that the beat chest, if you've beaten chest this turn, you create an agility token.
Yeah.
I think these cards are cool. I think these cards are good.
It's 3 card 8 though, right?
Or it's just 2 card 7. But if you get, the reason you're going to do this is if you get another, you want to compile your beat chest effects. You only have to discard any card to get the beat chest effect. So either you discard for another reason. So you beat chest on one thing and then you trigger everything else. You don't have to beat chest on every single card. So that's what you want to do. You want to combine this with Bonebreaker, Bellow, or whatever.
Okay. If you've beaten chest prior to this, then this is triggers. 2 card 8.
Yes, correct.
That's good, but jumping through hoops for 2 card 8 is
for sure. But otherwise, it's just a 2 card 7, and that's still good.
Fine, I guess. Yeah,
limited anyway.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Seems totally playable limited. I feel like most 3 for 7s you could play in limited would be good.
Yeah, I would take those. Let's look at commanding performance. I think this card's quite interesting. This is a warrior action at Majestic. It's red. It defends for 3, costs 1, and says your next warrior attack this turn gets +3 attack. Until end of turn, your warrior attacks get, when this is defended by 1 or more attack action cards, destroy a card in the defending hero's arsenal. So effectively, you play this, your next warrior attack, action or weapon gets +3 attack, and until end of turn, all warrior attacks get, when the attack is defended by 1 or more attack action cards, destroy a card in the hero's arsenal. So kind of CNC if they block with any attack action on any of your attacks for the turn. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I echo what you say about it. Seems good. It really does seem good. This warrior.
It's a 1 for 3, but if you ever get the Arsenal card then that's it's close to a 1 for 5, 1 for 6 kind of thing. And if they don't block because they want to keep their Arsenal, then you're probably pushing through other on-hit effects, and you're getting more than a 2 card, or a 1 for 3 value off this. So I think this card is maybe a bit more niche than it looks, but I think this card is good. It is powerful, and paired with the right sort of builds, I think in Constructed this can be quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We've also seen some attack actions, which, as we get into Limited next week and we talk about the set review, I think there's going to be some discussion on how good are warrior attack actions. Some of them look like they've got hoops to jump through, as Brendan likes to say. Vigorous Engagement is one that we've just seen. It's a common cycle of warrior attack reactions. It defends for 2, and I'm looking at the red. They all cost 1. It says target warrior attack, it's +3 attack. If it's defended by an attack action card, create a vigor token. I mean, so it's a 1 resource, 3 power reaction. Reactions seem good in the set, but also if there's an attack blocking it, you get a vigor token. So you get your resource back. I mean, this is pretty good.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't have it's kind of like a reprise. It's kind of like reprise because it has to be defended by something in order to get the token. It doesn't seem very I've been consistently evaluating these things in Constructed. I think it's going to be good in Limited. These kind of effects are just good in Limited most of the time, but
it's Constructed not so.
Yeah, it seems underwhelming compared to Ironside Response for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of other cards that I think. Let's talk about Down but Not Out. This is a rare. So far we've just seen the rare, so I assume this is going to be a cycle, but I've only seen the red one so far, so it's a rare. Down, we're looking at the red one. Cost 3, attacks for 5, defends for 3, which I think is relevant. It says when this attacks a hero, if you have less life and control fewer equipment and tokens than them, this gets +3 overpower. And when this hits, create an agility, might, and vigor token. I mean, this seems like quite a good in-game card.
Yeah, that's just
this reminds me of I think this card it defends for 3 as well. And if this is a cycle, this is one where the yellow is, we're talking about the power trade-off before. The yellow still has a break point. It still seems pretty good.
I would be surprised if this card has a cycle, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't see. I'm looking at we've just pulled these previews from the Discord channel to go through, so I'm not even sure if this is loaded into Fabry yet. But yeah, I mean, this card seems really good. I think this is a first pickable card in limited. I think.
No, I think this card is really powerful. It's generic. What the?
It's generic. Yeah, it's not even like a class hybrid or anything. It's just generic.
What?
So I'm excited about this card. I think it's, I think obviously early in the game, like, do I want to be playing a 2-card 5? Probably not. But, maybe I just defend with it and maybe I do play it. But late in the game, and I do draw this to be able to finish off with, an 8 power that then also gets me all these effects that I can use next turn. I mean, that seems...
This card is nuts. So the main thing that you're worried about is actually fewer equipment, I feel like, because less life is you can easily manipulate. I mean, equipment you can technically manipulate, but manipulate to your detriment. And
you need them to have a token as well.
It's so, funny is like in Icelander, this would have been like the best card ever printed because you give them a frost, like you can give them frostbites and they have the token, and then now you can make this like this is an insane attack action. But I guess
this has constructed implications in, or is it just limited? Because this looks like a limited all-star to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would think I would play this in Iceland. I'm trying to think of it. So you have to main phase, or in some time, they have to have the Frostbite token during your turn, right? Yeah. Frostbites break at the end of your opponent's turn. So it does mean that it has to be played with something, because that Frostbite needs to be created by you on that turn. Mm-hmm. I'm talking like Living Legend format here. But... yeah, I mean, in terms of the equipment, Icelander does have a pretty throwaway equipment in terms of like the Iron Rot Gauntlet, so you could block with that a little bit early, then have equipment asymmetry, and then you're playing a 2-card 9, like a lot of the time.
Yeah,
that's nuts.
It is a cycle, by the way.
It's not 2-card 9; it's 2-card 11.
Yeah, I've just checked that it does have a cycle. Just looking at the set numbers. So yeah, this card's really good. Also, the art on this card is sick.
Yeah, it's all low res right here, but
go look at it on Fabry. It looks great. 2 more cards I want to talk about. There's a Majestic that's interesting. Let's leave that when we talk about constructed. Let's talk about what do I want to talk about? Let's talk about this Guardian. It's primed to fight. It's a Guardian attack action at Majestic, so it's a red. It attacks for 9, defends for 3, and says if you control a Vigor token, this costs 1 less to pay. And if you've controlled a Might token this turn, this gets +1. So even if they blew up in the start of turn, so let's just say you had a Vigor token, this would be a 2-card 9 because you get the +1 resource plus this costs 1 less. So it costs 4 and you have a resource, you pitch your blue, you're coming in for a 2-card 9. That's pretty insane. If you've got a Might token, then you're coming in with an extra +1 on your Might token. So this would be coming in for 11. So imagine if you Blue Sky, you have the Vigor token and the Might token. You start your turn, you get to 2-card 11. I mean, that's pretty powerful. I think more likely you're going to get one of these effects, but either of those effects is pretty good. Otherwise, this is on rate damage-wise for a Guardian red that costs 5. So, no one-hit effect, obviously, but you get this modality of being able to like potentially get some extra effects on this. I think this card's good.
Yeah, seems good. I mean, it's mostly contextual on jumping through the hoops to satisfy I think you need to be satisfying those clauses because you'd rather play. It's the derivative card of this that has the unhit trigger. If you're not able to consistently do that.
Yeah, otherwise it's just vanilla and that's bad. So you want to hit it at least one of these effects.
Yeah. But it has a chance to be very, very, very strong. It's like you said.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. All right, let's do one more. And I think let's talk about the Clash of Agility / Clash of Might. I think these cards are interesting for limited. So let's look at Clash of Agility. It's a rare at red, attacks for 6, defends for 3. It's a brute / warrior attack action. It says when this defends, clash with the attacking hero, the winner creates an agility token, and then Clash of Might is a brute / guardian attack action, and it's the same stats, except it says when this defends, clash with an attacking hero, the winner creates a Might token. These cards seem really good, like 2 cost attacks for 6 that defend for 3, and then they also have this modality effect of when you defend with it. So when you trade it in for the 3 defensive value, you get to clash for an agility or Might token. I think, in the right decks, this seems really powerful.
Yeah, I don't know if it seems like busted, to be honest.
It's not busted. It's just really good and limited, though. And
I think you want to be winning that clash every time, which
don't defend with that otherwise.
Yeah, it sounds obvious, but if you have that asymmetry because you're playing a guardian, your opponent's playing a warrior, and you're going to be winning that clash, then I think it's a powerful card. But I don't think it's insane. What I like about the card is that it's dual class, so this is like a really good potential early pick to stay open. And how relevant that will be, we'll see.
I hope very relevant. So I want to tie up with just kind of the the comments around Welcome to Rathe 2.0 and kind of what I'm seeing. I think really for me, it comes down to a lot about the limited play, and it looks like the deck building and kind of the actual draft. The draft portion of Welcome to Rathe, I think, has the most archetypes in it of any set so far, and has this ability for you to stay open because the generic's really powerful in that set, and find your way into a particular archetype or class towards the end of pack 1. Now, they do have 15 card packs. We're only at 14 card packs still. But I think what some of my comparisons are is the fact that we have all 3 wedges. So we have the Brute Warrior, the Warrior Guardian, the Brute Guardian wedges. These are kind of servicing some of the same power level as the generics that went into maybe 2 or 3 of the heroes from Welcome to Rathe. But so you are staying open. Plus, you actually have some powerful generics in the set as well. And then on top of that, I think you have some of the things like the weapons and stuff that drive archetypes. So I think there's a lot of I'm seeing similarity between what I think this limited format might be. My concern is the fact that you're going to want to draft some weapons and equipment because they're so powerful, but we're at 14 card packs. I'm interested to see what that means, but I'm hopeful that, just because of the cards in the set, the wedges, some ability to stay open, the 14 card packs actually finally shine with the set, I think. And then from a constructor standpoint, Brendan, just quickly, I think the kind of comparison I'm seeing is just I think there's some really interesting cards that could be staples in here in terms of what they do for these particular classes. And there's new ways to play, which I felt a lot of the time we've had iterations on ways to play. Like a mechanic like Beat Chest feels like a really new way to play. Some of these equipment look like they remind me of some of the Crucible of War equipment a little bit as well, which, Welcome to Rathe obviously being the first set, introduced some equipment that made you play in a particular way. Let's take tectonic plating, for instance. Tectonic plating was the basis of how you played Bravo for so long. I don't know. I'm seeing some resemblances, and I like it. I've really enjoyed what we've seen so far of the set. I'm super excited for heavy hitters. I'm just excited for this weekend.
Okay. Yeah, I'm keen. I mean, I honestly think that before we do the limited review, you and I should hop on a online emulator and play some Gauntlet decks, because you're going to have a lot of context. I mean,
sure.
Actually playing the set is so important to, because I just, every single time we've done a limited set, we have our thoughts, we're 100% correct every time. But then I finally touched the set, and I'm like, why did I think some of those stupid things that I said during?
No, you realize you're 110% correct.
Yeah, 110% correct. It just doubled down, and I'm like, okay. So yeah, I'm keen to hear how it goes, and good luck in the calling. Hopefully, it's a good sealed format, because yeah, I mean that's part of the deal when you play limited calling. You just got to get through the sealed portion. You had a really good sealed run at Barcelona, though, so
bugger off. I've only played 2 sealed callings, and I've missed day 2. Those are my 2 events I've ever missed day 2 on, and they're 2 sealed events.
Yeah,
so
that's when I give the listeners a little nugget as well. I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this, but the best part and the funniest part about being a content creator, specifically when it's not happening to you, is when someone, if it's you or if it's your friend, like in this case, Hayden. Yeah, when you do really bad at a tournament, like really shit, so you're like 0-2, 0-3, everybody comes up and the first thing they say is, how's it going? And you're like, oh, fuck. And then you say you're like 0-2, 0-3.
I'm good, thank you.
But the next thing that happens is like, oh,
what happened?
Why? And then you got to just go through this perpetual explanation, and this happens multiple times. Like, it could be happening like every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 30 minutes. You have to explain why you are so bad at the game.
I just throw my deck. At Barcelona, I just threw my deck at people and was like, here. And just people looking at, okay, got it. Oh man, because I went up to Hayden. went up to Hayden multiple times during that sealed portion. I'd stand next to him and I'd watch him experience that. I feel like, oh, what, you're 0-3? Why, bro? What happened? This is the first time for everything. It's all right. That's my first experience of that. But I learned from a master watching Brendan have to explain it, so it's fine.
Yeah, I just go. Sometimes it's like that.
Sometimes it's like that. I just remembered I did win a sealed calling, so my sealed callings haven't all been terrible, but. It could be better. We'll see this weekend. I did have one thing to say, and I forgot what it is. So I don't know. I'm pumped. I want to play some sealed, and I want to play a good sealed format. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, same.
Knock on wood.
I want to play a good pre-release format. It sounds kind of weird, but I thought Bright Light Seal was really bad. I think
it's the worst.
Yeah, pre-release was. Arcane Rising has a word, wants a word with you for worst seal. They're comparable. But yeah, I would like to play a fun pre-release. Like I really did not enjoy the sealed format in Bright Lights. Even like day one, touching the set, I was like, I played the first game and I was like, holy crap. But I hope for a good sealed format. I hope we can get away from and I don't know if it's possible, but the pile decks and the very, very grindy kind of attrition based sealed formats, which I think I don't think that they're objectively bad. I think they're fun in their own right. They're fun at a high competitive level.
I like Outsiders. Outsiders.
For pre-release, they make me want to punch myself in the face. Like I'm just
not great.
Yeah.
Make sure to watch some coverage this weekend, Brennan. That's how you can get some insight into the format before a limited review as well. So.
True.
And for those listening, make sure, tune in. So this will drop on Friday. This will be basically when this drops, the premiere event will be about to kick off. So you can check out coverage for that. And then, of course, the calling for the weekend. But otherwise, Brennan, why don't you take us out?
Yep. Well, if you listen to this podcast and you enjoy it, the number one thing you can do is leak us the entire set because you're at the celebration before. No, I'm joking. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps so much. There's a video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/ArsenalPass, both on Twitter, BrendanAPG, Fian_Dale. Big thank you to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. Like I said, we're starting to ramp up for PTLA, the first Pro Tour of 2024. So expect those deck techs coming. I will be playing. Hayden will be playing. Team PCG Pass will be playing. Hopefully we can get Sasha's brain in there. And then, I think we're queued up. I mean, we're getting ready for, I think, a good performance this time. Barcelona wasn't the highlight of PCG Pass.
No, I wasn't prepared. It's fine. Yeah. I'm going to be prepared for PTLA. I'm going to do well.
Yeah.
I'm calling it.
We're set up to do pretty well. So we appreciate you all. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.